Thank you, Senator Ciccarello. Will you remark further? Good afternoon, Senator Hwang.
Good afternoon, Madam President. I am appreciative to be back into the Senate chambers, trying to do my best to represent the people of the 28th Senate District. And I want to extend a very warm welcome to Senator Fazio for his recent selection to the circle. We're here to kind of supposedly debate the merits of extending Governor Lamont's emergency powers until February 15th, 2022. It'll be nearly 2 years since the onset of the unprecedented COVID-19 health pandemic crisis that has truly changed our world. But 2 years of executive emergency powers. And I encouraged people, as I've said, to get vaccinated. I believe in the vaccine. I believe in the science of the vaccine, although not perfect, but has the co-ranking member of Public Health Committee and the co-chair of the bipartisan Bioscience Caucus. I do believe in the scientific process. And I do believe that the vaccine is a critical element to eradicating and hopefully managing this COVID pandemic in its variants. And most important of all, I want to take a moment to compliment the people that have made a positive difference in the state of Connecticut, irrespective of the emergency order that's given to the governor, and much credit has been given. It is important for us to take a moment to thank the people that have understood, taken the necessary precautions and safety protocols to protect themselves and to respect their neighbors and friends and communities. We have to acknowledge the businesses that have withstood and made costly investments to be able to continue to do their business while protecting their customers and consumers. We need to give a special thanks to our frontline healthcare workers that have tirelessly and courageously protected and served and saved many of our Connecticut residents. We also need to acknowledge our municipal leaders and state leaders for their leadership on this issue, in which we are a source of pride throughout the country and the world. I'm grateful to be in Connecticut. I'm really glad that we have taken the necessary steps to protect the people of Connecticut, to set a shining example on how we can do better to eradicate this pandemic. But I do believe that we cannot forsake that important responsibility with the equally important responsibility of a representative government. You know, for me, I'm so honored and privileged to serve as a state senator in this esteemed chamber that had its origin in 1639, one of the oldest continuing democracy in the world, where there are co-equal branches of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative. But for the past 19 months, we've been operating under an emergency power position that we as a legislative branch have given away to the executive branch. Now, there was a period of time in March of 2020 where there was a unified effort to try to better understand and to protect our community with uncertainties. But nearly 19 months later, we have seen an inconsistency in policy from a standpoint where we take great pride in being one of the most vaccinated, the lowest incidence of infection in the country. And as we have seen, ball fields, businesses, restaurants, and outdoor activities flourish. But the inconsistency comes where, at the same time as we tout these successes, these progress toward managing this pandemic, we're also hearing the grave concerns of the virus. The need to mandate vaccinations, overriding the 14th Amendment due process, justifying it by the police powers that are granted under the 10th Amendment for the greater public safety, while disregarding the body rights, the body choices of individuals as Americans. We're putting masks and requiring masks. If there is a medical basis and justification, let us be aware of it. But when we, under this emergency power given to the governor, get a decision from the governor that says, wait, I'm going to let each town decide what to do on the masking. I could tell you from the municipalities that I represent, it created tremendous confusion. It created an unenforceable indifference. Again, if we are truly in an emergency, then so be it. Let us operate under that mode of consistency. A consistency that's based on science, based on medical data, not a selectively pick and choose of policy. I will support what is in the best interest in protecting our community. But I struggle when I see the inconsistencies of these executive powers being put into play. We have done a very good job in Connecticut, and I know that we will continue to do a good job as Connecticut residents, recognizing, again, the residents, our businesses, our frontline healthcare workers, our teachers, our general community in understanding that we all need to work together. But the inconsistency under these emergency powers has created such emotional frustration and tempest, if I may dare. It is really ironic today that I spent time with the Secretary of State talking about today being National Voter Registration Day, where we touted about the idea that people should be engaged, should register to vote, to have their voices be heard, to elect their representative government, and that people should register, vote, have your voices be heard. The same day that we're saying your voice matters as a voter, we are, as the legislative branch, representing the voice of each of the people in their respective districts, are going to cast a vote that said, we will relinquish that power for nearly 6 more months, to the tune of nearly 2 years of saying, we're in an emergency. Despite what you did in Election Day, November of 2020, we're going to say your voice has to be on hold. That the legislative branch has relinquished its co-equal branch of government role because of an emergency. An emergency that is real in our community, but is it justifiable by facts, by science, and by the realities of what we see day in and day out? I beg to differ with that. We have legislators, freshman legislators that were elected in 2020 that have not had the opportunity to enjoy the unique experience of having a live public hearing, of having an engaged legislative process where all sides and all shareholders had an opportunity to interact and share their viewpoints, not only through Zoom and emails and limited debates, but to have a real, visceral, interactive, democratic process. They've not had that because we as legislators have freely given away our role in co-equal branches of government. I wonder how these legislators, freshman legislators, will go back in their district and said, I did all of this for you. They can't. We've had an incomplete session. We haven't heard the complete voices of people. In fact, come October 1st of 2021, there'll be many laws enacted that were passed through this legislative session where there was no public participation in these chambers and in this building. But these laws that will be passed may be a surprise to some people. Some of them may be good. Some of them may be overreaching. Some of them clearly ignore the voice of the people. But guess what? They'll become law, and they will impact the lives of the people we supposedly represent. How do you explain that? How do you look to the voters and say, I've earned your vote because I have represented you, I have fought for you, I have been your voice in the chambers? We can't. We can't. It's important to understand, if we're saying this is an emergency power, then truly back it up. But we have inconsistencies all over that I've cited earlier, and we will continue to see, which frustrates people to no end. Are we as a legislative branch ignoring the voice of the people for the convenience of one-party rule? The idea that we can selectively pick and choose bills based upon the legislative majority's prerogative, working with the governor to pass bills that impact people's lives. When the opposition party, whether it be Republicans or the general public that voice their frustration and disagreement, are muted and portrayed as extremists, fringe elements, uncooperative. Yes, the emotions may boil over, but democracy isn't pretty. Democracy in this country represents an opportunity to give people a voice that should be heard by the representatives they elect, that sits in the co-equal branches of the legislative branch because we are the voice of the people. Under this emergency power, we are not listening to the people. I stand ready to come into this building and respond quickly to cast any necessary vote related to the COVID-19 pandemic, related to the housing crisis and eviction concerns, related to mandates that are being passed through. I want to have the accountability of that vote. I want to cast a vote where my constituents can come to me and say, I agree, I disagree. But for us to not cast that vote and allow the executive branch to exert emergency power, and for us as a legislative branch to do that for the 6th time, is not the democracy that I know and believe in. I'll tell you why I fervently believe in the right of co-equal branches of government, of engagement by the people and hearing their voice. As a first-generation immigrant, where my parents escaped from communist China and went to the Republic of China in Taiwan, the government, the democratic parliamentary government of Taiwan, imposed martial law because of, quote, an emergency, the threat of an emergency. And the imposition of martial law allowed for the president to control the press, to control the legislative agenda, to control the budgetary process, and a complicit parliament, the Kuomintang Party, which is of the same party of the president, remain in office for 38 years. There were no free elections. There was no opposition because, quote, for 38 years, Taiwan as a parliamentary democracy operated under martial law. And as a child growing up, guess what? I didn't know the difference. The media, the government messages, the policies. There was no dissenting voice. There was no opposition. There was no allowances for differing ideas, facts, and disagreement. For nearly 2 years, we've operated under emergency powers. I hope and pray to the heavens that we don't go 38 years. But you know, as I studied the history, the initial onset of martial law in Taiwan was temporary. But what I also read was the fact that it's pretty convenient. It's much easier to lead by emergency powers. You don't have the messiness of democracy, the messiness of deliberations and discontent. That's what America was built on. And I will tell you, having lived under dictatorship, under the guise of parliamentary government in an emergency, people were willing to give up their powers because they became comfortable. They became numb. They looked at any opposing viewpoints as fringe, extremist, unpopular, and a risk to people around us. The sanctimonious shaming and the portrayal of people with dissenting viewpoints, passionately in some cases, is unhealthy. And for that to come from legislators themselves is inappropriate. We represent the people. We take all of it, plus or minus. It is the privilege and the burden of representative government. But to shame people, to categorize them as fringe elements out of touch when they passionately believe in what they believe in, is not a way we should go as esteemed members of this chamber or in the House. I'll leave on this quote, and it says, quote, "We're not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open marketplace is a nation that is afraid of its people." And this is a quote given by JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, that addressed health concerns in the 1960s. We need to seek the courage and the collaboration and to have co-equal branches of government engage in this process, to let the voice and the representative government of the people, the legislative branch, engage in creating solutions. And let us as legislative representatives cast a vote that we will be judged on. And I hope we move to vote no on this resolution, and for us as a legislative body to get back to do the work that we have been entrusted by the people who elected us, to represent them in overcoming this critical pandemic crisis. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Will you